Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to take a look at the mood in the Tory media as any pretense to recovery seems to be firmly in the bin now. The Tories are going to lose, they're going to lose badly, and it's now only a question of when and just how badly. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So just 6 months ago, after another disastrous set of local election results for the Conservatives, worse than even they expected, the Tory client media were trying to put a positive spin on it. Using highly spurious arguments, they tried to suggest that it was only likely to result in a hung parliament, not an outright Labour victory. It was a complete nonsense, but it's all they had. Perception is everything in politics, and if voters could be persuaded that a hung parliament was the best that Labour could hope for, then they may still choose a majority Conservative government over a minority Labour government, as they did in 2015 and 2017. But the mood has completely changed. The Times are talking about a Labour victory even larger than that in 1997, the Telegraph likewise. It's a remarkable turnaround given that the polls are not actually all that different to how they were earlier in the year, although Labour have technically increased their lead in recent weeks. For some time, I've noticed that all the talk of the so-called narrow path to victory seems to have ceased from anyone even pretending to be a serious commentator. Tom Harwood of GB News the other day said that the Conservatives should just concentrate on setting traps for Labour. What he means is causing damage to the UK economy and infrastructure, so much damage that Labour will struggle to repair it. That's how these people think. Back them into a corner, and they don't actually care about the public good or the country, they only care about their political tribe. But it was another example of how nobody's really seriously talking about the Tories even having a chance. And if you want to look at just how bad the situation is, plug polling results into the MRP model on electoral calculus. Now, a word of warning, of course, no model is perfect, of course, but the sheer scale of the situation means that even if you factor in a fairly hefty margin for error, the Tories are still in for a pounding. Using the poll of polls, if you want to sort of consider all pollsters to be equally valid, which they are not, and the 2023 boundaries, of course, very important you select that, because that is what's going to be used for the next election, you end up with Labour on 471 seats. That's a massive majority. In theory, you need a 326 seat, for a majority. But because of Sinn Féin not taking up their seats and, of course, the Speaker not having any say in voting, realistically, it's probably more like 320, 321 that you need for a majority. 471 seats, that is a beast of a majority. But most pollsters, they inflate the Reform UK vote. It's much higher in most polls than realistically they're going to get. And that would, of course, favour Labour because they're going to mostly take votes from the Conservatives. So let's use the results from Ipsos Mori's most recent poll. They don't produce them all the time because of the nature of they don't use online polling. It's sort of more telephone polling. They have a more sensible view of Reform UK's appeal. So let's plug their numbers in. That puts Labour on a 464 seat win. Well, it's a bit less, but it is still a monster. Incidentally, it would only give the Conservatives 106 seats. Hence, no matter what polls you use, the Tories are looking at a way worse result than 1997, and this is why the Tory media can no longer put a positive spin on things. But we don't really know if Reform UK are actually going to do anything, do we, if we're honest? I mean, let's imagine they stand down again at the next election. Who could bet against it? I'll even be generous and suggest that basically all of their vote goes to the Conservatives. What would that do to those Ipsos poll results? Well, I will point out I'm not actually allowed to put Reform UK on nothing, so I gave them 1%. It results in Labour winning 414 seats. Now, that's way less than actually if you put any current polls in there, but it's still a majority of over 150. For reference, the Tories won a majority of 80 in 2016, and that was considered huge. The sheer size of the gap simply gives the Tories nowhere to turn. Like, even if you suppose that somehow the polls are favouring Labour in different ways, you may think that, well, the MRP model, I mean, it's not perfect. Maybe it's unwittingly favouring Labour. You may think that individual pollsters are unwittingly favouring Labour with their collection or analysis methods, even when you sort of put them all together and find the average. You may say there'll be lots of Conservative voters who are currently saying don't know, so they're not included in the polls. But on election day, they'll hold their nose and vote Tory. Now, that is probably true. You know, that you may suppose that not many will actually vote for Reform UK at all, that they will vote Tory rather than let Labour in. That may also be true. But even if you account for all of these things and you adjust the polling figures accordingly, you still end up with a Labour majority. And then consider something else. So if you look at the various polls flying around now, as well as mostly showing Reform UK getting a higher share of the vote than is being reflected in the various by-elections we've been getting, or even the Brexit Party votes in 2019 in the seats they did stand, we're also seeing higher than usual levels of support for the Green Party. Now, it's quite usual for the Green Party to enjoy decent support in the polls until the general election, and then it drops like a stone as many of their supporters decide to vote tactically. And where do you suppose that tactical support is going? It's hardly going to find its way to the box next to the Conservative candidate, is it? So although Conservatives may put some faith in currently undecided voters holding their nose and voting Tory, which I've no doubt will happen, there will be others who switch from unrealistic options to vote tactically against the Conservatives. We've already seen this in evidence during the by-elections of the past couple of years. Anyone taking a proper strategic look at the situation can see the holes the hole the Conservatives are in. The current situation is that Labour are looking at a 200-seat majority. That is the default position. So if you want to imagine a Tory recovery, what can you look at? Well, let's go down the list. The first is, as I've said, those don't knows. Many of whom will be Conservative voters who can't bring themselves, even in an anonymous poll, to say they'll support the Tories. But on polling day, something will switch in their brain and they'll think somehow it'll be better than Labour. That is a credible source of some tightening of the polls. However, as I also said, we are looking at the next election resulting in a lot of tactical voting. A lot of it. And so they could easily just cancel each other out. This will certainly not be a significant source of advantage for the Tories. It might not be any source at all. Second, the hope that some of the problems in the country might abate come the actual election. You know, if people are feeling better, maybe it's better the devil you know. Well, the economic forecast is not good. The Tories are currently focused on CPI inflation, the number coming down. But that's not stopping people feeling the cost of living crisis getting worse. They've already said that they don't intend to let energy prices come down, even though they easily could. So they're not actually making any moves to ease the cost of living crisis, even where they have the power to do so. So it doesn't sound like there's going to be a feel-good factor to the economy next year. The Tories are also doing nothing to improve public services. They're pinning their hopes on conning people into thinking that things are getting better by pointing to a graph without those people actually feeling it. Third, they could hope that Labour implodes. Now, it's certainly true that if Labour were to suddenly start making poor decisions or be riven with infighting, that the public could have doubts. But consider that Labour unity has been put under more pressure over the past month as a result of events in the Middle East that the UK has no real influence over than it has for years. There's been a lot of focus on Labour's woes over the issue in the national media, yet Labour have actually extended their lead in the polls in this time. This is basically Starmer's greatest crisis as leader, and he's actually strengthened Labour's position. At this point, if you're looking for some Tory copium, you just give up, as indeed the Tory media seem to have done. The bottom line is that Labour have their eyes on the prize. Those who would seek to divide a political party have way more difficulty in gaining traction when the status quo is in favour of that party, when things are going well. It's much easier for Tory rebels to gain purchase because things are very clearly going in the wrong direction, so they can have an argument about what should be done. So even when Labour come under pressure over an issue, the vast majority pull together, eyes on the prize. What's happening with the Tories is that they have a large number of MPs who won their seats by bucking political wisdom in 2019, but because they've got a fundamental lack of understanding about why that was, They failed to understand, for example, that it was because Labour were doing likewise and, well, the public had to pick one. As for the rest of them, they never really knew why they won their seats in the first place, even if they did so before 2019. It just sort of happened. It happened because the public was swinging away from the 13-year-old Labour government to the Conservatives. Well, that public mood is now swinging back the other way. And the Tories think that the right thing to do is somehow to abandon the voters who are turning towards Labour and chase after the small number eyeing up Reform UK. It's hard to see anything on the horizon that can possibly come to the rescue of the Tories next year. And it's not like they're even working to create those conditions themselves. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.